Without further ado, we need to hear from Michael, so let's give a big applause as he comes to
I want to take it one step further around the food. How many people in here have ever eaten juke balls? See, that's something even worse than the food that was described. That's what they feed you in solitary confinement in LA County jails as a form of punishment. It is actually a ball of like rice, veggies all mixed up. It's terrible, no flavor, and you get a glass of water with that. But thankfully, I'm here today eating much better food, right? And amongst people like you who are also here to hear about solitary confinement, the end of it, the campaigns. And so my name is Michael Saavedra. I am the national coordinator for NEARCAT, which is the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. I'm also a part of the National Network of Solitary Confinement Survivors. So who is NEARCAT? The National Religious Campaign Against Torture is a coalition of interfaith organizations and directly impacted people working together to end torture in U.S. policy, prisons, and culture. We do that in 3 ways: by grassroots organizing, public education, and state and national advocacy. So here's a little bit about my incarceration that was mentioned earlier. I did spend 19 and a half years in prison this last time, 15 of that in solitary confinement. But prior to that, as a juvenile, I spent 5 years in solitary confinement. I could tell you a little bit more, about my incarceration. So at the age of 25, I was locked up for stealing a car, actually. And in LA County at the time, this was during the war on drugs, the war on gangs. There was a lot of gang enhancements, gun enhancements, different type of enhancements that they added on to people's time, which could add on 10, 20 to life. While I was incarcerated, I spent the first 15 years of that 19 and a half years in solitary confinement in Pelican Bay SHU. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pelican Bay SHU, but it was a new experimental maximum security solitary confinement prison built in Northern California. At the time, they had very racist policies and practices of what they call validating prisoners as associates of prison gangs. So you got to understand, which I'm sure more people will talk about, the different ways a person can land in solitary confinement by a number of ways, simply by not having your shirt tucked in, taking too much food from the kitchen or what have you. But in California, they had a targeted program, right, that targeted Black, brown, and indigenous folks based on your association, based even on simple things such as a drawing, right? As we can see here, one of my drawings that I did while I was incarcerated, in a way to be, it's very therapeutic to draw. It helped me to spend my time and not thinking about all the crazy madness in there. And it also developed my skills, right? My artistic skills. And so I began to learn more about my history, my indigenous history. And through that, I began to draw things, right? However, CDCR, California Department of Corrections, felt that this drawing was had a gang symbol within it. And therefore, that was enough to place a person in solitary confinement. And if you're Black, it's even worse. If you have a book, have you all heard of George Jackson? He wrote a book called Blood in My Eyes. He spent a lot of time in prisons as well. And he was a Black Panther Party leader. So if you're in prison in California and you have a book and you're Black and you're caught with a George Jackson book in your cell, that's enough to put you in solitary confinement, as well as many other indigenous symbols, cultural symbols. If you're Irish, etc., many of these type of symbols and drawings are enough to put people in solitary. And most of it is just a pretext to silence prison leaders, advocates, people like myself. When I went into prison, that started learning about the law, I began to advocate and help others as well. So that was part of the reason why I went to solitary confinement. But while I was in solitary confinement, I met a group of men that had even been in there longer than myself. Some men had been in there 30, 40 years in California, based on these same racist policies of gang validation association. So in 2011, most of us, myself included, once I was in solitary confinement, I began to go to the law library. First as a way just to get out of the cell, get some, and maybe see other people. But they also have these very oppressive rules in the law library where if you talk to another prisoner, you could lose your law library privileges for 30 days. Just by a simple, hey, how's it going, Frank? You're out, you're kicked out. They have cameras in front of every little, what they call it, they're little cages, right? Where you sit in, they have a metal desk and a metal stool, and the guards bring you the books. You have to know what book you want, what case you want. They're not going to help you to find anything. And if you get a response from the court, they're not going to help you to decipher it, right? So this is something that's very difficult for most prisoners. As you know, the courts they don't appoint lawyers for civil litigations, right? And in this case, when we were trying to advocate against the inhumane treatment in solitary, we had to go through the civil litigation process, right? Fortunately for me, I was able to learn it and navigate it successfully, and I won 3 lawsuits against the Department of Corrections for having me in solitary without due process and in very inhumane conditions of confinement. Windowless cell, thank you. But I wasn't the only person. There were other men in there as well that were also learning the law and using the courts to try to remedy their situation and gain their freedom. But part of the problem in California is California prisons are very racist dynamics, right? I would say in California, unlike New York, unlike Texas, they segregate the prisoners by race, right? And also geographically, right? So say you're from Southern California, you're labeled as a Southerner. If you're from Northern California, you're labeled a Northerner. They segregate people in cells by race. Blacks can't cell up with whites. Whites can't cell up with blacks. Brown people can't cell up with blacks, etc. And it's created a lot of racial hostility because as most people know, state-created violence is a way of controlling the prison population, right? You divide and conquer. So if you have all these people fighting against each other, they're not going to look at their oppressors. They're going to continue to fight over little crumbs or what have you, little territory on the yard, when they only put 2 benches or 1 basketball court, and you have different groups of people all trying to use the same area. So it can be a lot of racial tensions. In California, in 1999, right after I was incarcerated, there was one of the largest prison riots in the United States in Pelican Bay Prison. There was over 200 black folks and 150 quote unquote Hispanics, and I believe 10 white folks, right, that were involved in this. One person got killed. A friend of mine was shot in the head. It's all on video. You can see it on YouTube. So stemming from that, it made it very difficult when we came together to say, you know what, how do we end solitary confinement in California? How can we stop this, right? As prisoners, how can we all come together and unite? So some folks looked at different ways, like, you know, what happened in Attica. Let's hold guards hostage and demand our freedom. But folks were like, we know how that ended, right? People were killed, and then they could use that against you to say, see, these people are violent. We need to lock them up. So we thought of a way to do this as a more peaceful protest, if you will, right? And so we looked at Gandhi, we looked at other movements that utilize hunger strikes as a way to bring attention and to bring advocacy to our situation. And so in 2011, a group of prisoners in solitary confinement from every race and faction started talking. And we all started talking about this peace, end of hostilities agreement, right? Which meant we had to put all of our hatred, all of our hostilities against other races, other factions to the side so that we could build solidarity and do this large hunger strike, right? So in 2011, we had one of the largest hunger strikes in this nation's history in the prison system. Over 20,000 people across the state joined us. Imagine, we're just the solitary confinement population, but people on general population, people across the state, even on level ones, camps, etc., joined us in solidarity to stop a whole day. They just shut all the prisons down, right? And that continued on for months. At the same time, we had family members like Dolores Canales and others who have loved ones inside protesting at the state capitol, protesting in front of the prisons to end solitary confinement. Now, through that, it lasted many years. It lasted almost till 2016, I believe, that we finally got into a settlement agreement with CDCR through our lawyers. It also turned into a class action lawsuit. So as I was saying, myself and many others have been utilizing the law to bring attention and to receive some type of remedy to this. But I think it was around 2014, a group of lawyers from human rights, ACLU, many other organizations of lawyers filed a class action on behalf of us, right? So they actually used our work, though. They used especially Todd Ashner, who was the lead plaintiff. And so in this class action, they sued the governor, right, to end solitary confinement. And in 2016, the state finally agreed to acquiesce and to settle on the agreements that we had, the demands that we wanted, right? I should say, though, this came at no easy cost because of the fact that a few people died during the hunger strikes, and it went on for quite some time. And the last push was for 60 days straight without eating. The prison system actually got so upset at this, and they couldn't think of a way how to prevent us from doing this. So they said, you know, these people, if all these people die, once people started dying, they're losing money. It's around approximately $100,000 per person that the state gets, the prison gets, to house a person for 1 year. So if bodies start dying, but that's money that they're losing, right? So they went to the judge in the federal district court, in the Northern District Court of California, to get a court order to force feed the leaders and those that were pushing the hunger strike, right? So literally they came and folks were already skinny, already very delirious in some situations, tired. And so it was easy for them to strap us down, put a tube down our throat, and literally force feed us through those means. And we're talking about eating terrible food. That is something that is not nice at all. So through that, after that push, they were like, okay, let's come to the table. We had a settlement agreement drawn up, which actually ended solitary confinement for those that were in 10 years or more. We were automatically kicked out, which included myself and many others. But not only that, it also gave us more due process, and they weren't allowed to keep people in solitary for 5 years, more than 5 years. So right now, that case is being appealed in the federal courts by CDCR, who's trying to eliminate those settlement agreements. And so in California, folks like NARCAT and others came. As a matter of fact, Disability Rights California, actually a lawyer who was doing work in an immigration detention center, was appalled by the confinement, solitary confinement of children, right, and pregnant people and others within the immigration detention centers. So he wrote a bill called the California Mandela Act, which poses to ban solitary confinement in California, especially of those that are pregnant, have disabilities, and fall within certain age limits. That's where we're at right now in California, and we're working on this bill, hoping that the governor will sign it this time. He did not sign it last year. So that's some of our state work that we do. We also work with other states like DecARcerate Arkansas, and try to uplift and push other states' campaigns that are trying to end solitary confinement. This is our United States, our national campaign, which poses to end all forms of solitary confinement. And when people are put in solitary confinement for certain reasons, it's limited to 15 days, and that they have out of cell time and much more programming, right? Like education, college programs, etc. We also want to enhance more due process protections for folks, having the hearings, evidence, etc., that they typically don't give a person when placing somebody in solitary confinement. And then finally, creating oversight and enforcement mechanisms that ensures that these institutions continually practice ending this, abolishing and making solitary confinement more humane as programs that are needed. So we also have the National Network of Solitary Survivors, and if folks would like to join, here's the URL, right? I'm sorry, I'm a little behind on technology, but here's the URL code. Folks can join us. If you know anybody that's a solitary confinement survivor, please help them sign up. And we have a lot of resources, a lot of mentorship. Yes, sir.
Would you define solitary confinement? What does that really mean?
What does it mean to you?
No, what does it mean? What is it?
I would say solitary confinement is placing a human in a cell by himself with nothing. Not having any contact with other human beings. Pretty much isolated.
How big is your cell?
Some cells, it depends on the prison. Some cells are smaller than your bathroom in your home.
Are the doors?
We're gonna have, I'm sorry, we're gonna have questions.
I'm using vocabulary that we don't relate. Just clarify. Like you use
No worries.
SHU. What is SHU?
It's called the Security Housing Unit. In California, and even in New York, they refer to their solitary confinement housing as SHU units. So there's ways that folks here can get involved. If you'd like to get involved, you can sign the National Pledge, a moral call to end the torture of solitary confinement. You can organize a screening of one of our films, which is called Torture in Our Name. You can join or invite others to NARCAT's National Network of Solitary Survivors, as I mentioned earlier. You could also join in one of the more than 20 state campaigns working on education and advocacy to end the torture of solitary confinement. You can share one of the humans out of solitary videos on social media, or use it for an opening reflection in the meeting. You can invite solitary survivors to speak at an online or in-person event. You can contact Johnny Perez, who is our director. You can also organize a reading or production of If the Shoe Fits. There you go, the shoe. You can also organize a reading or production of If the Shoe Fits, Voices from Solitary Confinement, or you can use one of the virtual reality experiences. You could also bring the NARCAT replica cells to a national conference or build your own. So we have for you, sir, I would love for you to see our exhibit. We have an exhibit. It's a life-size mock cell with solitary confinement cell, where it has the sink, the toilet, the beds. It's very small, and even you can hear voices of what it would sound like to be in prison. I really, really recommend for those that have the guts or the heart. I did it once, and it was very triggering. But we have a virtual reality experience. I got to experience it myself and watch others experience at our Chicago conference. And it's a 3D virtual. You actually are in a solitary cell, and it feels so real. It's scary, but it does give people a sense of how inhumane it is. And this is my information if anybody wants to get connected to NARCAT, and then also Johnny Perez, our director. So thank you.